Sweetened condensed milk is a good ingredient for sweet recipes because of all the added sugar, about 25% by weight. But when sweetened condensed milk was invented in the 1800s, the original reason for adding sugar to the milk was not for flavor, but for protection against spoilage. And it works. Even after you open the can, sweetened condensed milk keeps longer than fresh milk. That added sugar kills bacteria that would otherwise digest the milk and spoil it. The sugar kills not by poisoning the bacteria, but by a more direct physical process. It draws water out of the bacteria so the bacterial cells shrivel and die. Each bacterial cell has a sort of skin, technically a membrane. Water can pass through this membrane pretty easily, but substances dissolved in the water can't. Water has a natural tendency to move toward any region where there's a high concentration of dissolved substances. A bacterial cell in a can of sweetened condensed milk finds itself immersed in an extremely concentrated solution of sugar. Water inside the cell will therefore pass out through the cell membrane into the sugar solution. The bacterial cell dehydrates and dies in a sea of sugary water. Sugar added to fruit has the same effect. That's the idea behind fruit preserves. Other foods are preserved with salt, exploiting the same principle. After World War II, European countries increased their efforts to live peacefully together on their small continent. To improve business and trade, 6 countries, Germany, France, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, came together in 1958 to create a common economy and currency. These countries agreed not to use trade barriers like tariffs, embargoes, or quotas with each other. This led to a more prosperous economy in these countries. Less than the years went on, more European countries joined this group called the European Union, or EU for short. There are currently 21 countries in the EU after United Kingdom left, and there are other countries like Turkey that hope to join the EU. The EU worked to help create jobs in poor parts of Europe and pass laws to protect the environment. The group or union focused on the idea that all goods, services, people, and money should be able to move freely through the EU countries. Europeans no longer had to carry their passports when traveling between the EU countries. They could instead travel from country to country, much like the people in the United States travel from state to state. You may not know much, if anything, about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but you have probably heard the well-known quote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." In his early work, Rousseau argued that mankind was happiest and at its best in a state of nature, that is, before the creation of society and civilization. He saw society as artificial and corrupt, and that good people were corrupted by it. The Social Contract is perhaps the most enduring and well-known of his books, covering pretty well every aspect of man in society. However, in this book, his attitude to the condition of man in a state of nature changes. In such conditions, man is brutish and competitive by nature, and there is no law or morality. Therefore, because it is easier to survive by joining forces with others, people form societies to better fight anything that might endanger their situation. Rousseau's political philosophy has had a profound influence on later thinkers, even though, or perhaps especially because, it is open to many interpretations. But political philosophy is not everybody's cup of tea. In his own time, Rousseau was a bestseller, with novels such as The New Eloise and especially Emile, though even the latter is not free of his constant desire to improve society. It illustrates his ideas about the best form of education, which involves educating a child's emotions before their reason. This too had a profound influence on educational theorists. Families are always related to the economy, the politics, the culture of the society. In herding societies, young people go out when they're 10 or 12 years old, and they hang out with the sheep or the goats, or whatever the herd is. That produces a kind of an loose bond between the pre-adolescences and their parents. In industrial societies, we tend to keep kids in school for longer, and then college is that point when they might break, or after college, depending on what they're doing. In agrarian societies, families have lots of kids and put them to work. They structure themselves as large families and put them all together in one home. The main point is that families are not separate from the society. Families and the economy and the politics are all wrapped up all together. The notion of establishing an international coalition to fight starvation was proposed by President Johannes of Germany on World Food Day in 2001. He proposed forming an international coalition to solve political and other problems that obstruct raising enough funds to fight starvation and poverty. The proposal received the support from a large number of people. 5 years later, in the World Grain Summit Conference, attendants decided to amend the manifesto to International Eradicate Starvation Coalition. Many people hope the coalition can be supported so that a resolution will be forged and plans made to eliminate starvation and poverty. In 2002, during the development fundraising conference held in Monterrey, Mexico, the Grain and Agricultural Organization, International Agricultural Development Fund, and World Grain Plan Department made a joint appeal for poverty elimination. They also expressed dissatisfaction that governments and development partners didn't turn their promise into a detailed action plan, so there is much to be desired. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Biden. I delivered a report to President Obama laying out how far we've come since he put me in charge of the cancer moonshot that was back in January, and lay out a real vision for where we need to go in the immediate future to do in 5 years what would otherwise take 10, to inject a real sense of urgency into the fight against cancer, and to change the culture and reimagine our system in order to be able to win. When President Nixon declared war on cancer in 1971, he had no army, he had no resources, and no clear strategy. But after 45 years of progress, funding research, training scientists and physicians, and treating millions of patients, we now have the army. We now have tools, powerful tools. And with this moonshot, we now have a clear strategy for the road ahead. It matters, folks, because there's a consensus now that we're at an inflection point with science, medicine, and technology all advancing faster than ever and offering real promise. We can't play by the rules of 1971. We didn't have this working for us. Okay, today's our first class. So I'd like to begin with some important definitions. We're going to use these terms all semester. So pay close attention to begin with. Chemistry is basically this study of matter. Matter is everything that makes up the universe. In this class, we're going to study the various elements and how they interact with one another. Sometimes they unite. When two or more elements unite, we call them compounds. Now, the study of chemical compounds is divided into two main branches of chemistry: organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. Organic chemistry is the study of compounds that contain the element carbon. This basically covers, it covers all living things. Carbon is an element all living organisms have in common. As for inorganic chemistry, it's the study of non-carbon-based compound. There are 5 differences between organic and inorganic compounds. Listen carefully to these. First, there are more than 10 million carbon compounds. That's 10 times the number of inorganic compounds. Why are there so many carbon compounds? Mostly because carbon bonds easily with other elements. It can also form complex crews. Got it? Okay. Second, organic compounds melt and boil at lower temperatures than inorganic compounds. Third, organic compounds don't dissolve in water as easily as inorganic compounds. Fourth, organic compounds catch fire more easily than inorganic compounds. However, inorganic compounds conduct heat and electricity more easily. Finally, organic compound reactions take place, and slower rates than do inorganic compound reactions. True to listen to part of a talk in a business management class. Management requires a great deal of energy and effort, more than most people care to make. One factor that affects managers and inhibits their capacity to provide leadership is stress. Stress has lots of causes: work overload, criticism from workers, and can have negative health effects, including loss of sleep. It's a fact managers have to deal with stress. Some handle it by making time to be by themselves, must have some favorite place or pastime, a beach to walk on, maybe a stream to fish in, or a game to play with the kids. It's important to have some form of rest and relaxation. Creating art, working with your hands, gardening, playing sports. The list goes on. Rest doesn't always mean inactivity. For some people, exercise is rest. There have been several influential studies in pain management. Some of the most interesting of these study endorphins, the body's own natural painkillers, for example. We now know that exercise stimulates the production of endorphins. Lack of exercise, on the other hand, only shuts down endorphin production, but can also lead to muscle deterioration. This is why you see a lot of pain specialists prescribing exercise for patients with chronic pain. Another interesting area involves the power of the placebo effect. We've known for some time that a sugar pill or other inactive placebo can sometimes make a sick person feel better. Somehow the power of suggestion or faith in the doctor for the drug will start a process of healing. We now think a neurochemical component. What may actually happen is the placebo effect allows some people to sort of tap into the supply of endorphins. In far northern Mongolia, the survival of the smallest ethnic tea group in the country depends on reindeer. An American named Morgan Kie visited the Satan community when she was studying in Mongolia in 2002. Leaders told her that the animals were not healthy, and the number of reindeer was getting too small to support the community. When she left, the chief gave her his grandfather's smoking pipe. That way she would remember the Satan and try to help them. The Satan have about 500 members. About half are reindeer herders up in the Taiga Mountains. The other half live in a town. Rutherford Hayes was born in Ohio in 1822. He was a good student at Kenyon College and at Harvard Law School. He opened a law office in Cincinnati. When he was 30 years old, he married Lucy Webb. Later, he served as an officer in the Union Army during America's Civil War. He was elected to the United States House of Representatives. He also served as mayor-governor of Ohio. In this job, he helped establish the college that became Ohio State University. The White House was the largest house in the country until after the Civil War in the 1860s. The White House has 132 rooms, including 16 family and guest rooms, 35 bathrooms, and 3 kitchens. There are 6 levels. The first level has many famous rooms. For example, the West Wing of the White House includes the Oval Office. This is where the president works and meets with his advisors. The president receives guests in the Blue Room. And the State Dining Room can hold 140 people for official in honor of foreign leaders. The second and third floors are the family's private areas. When it is cold outside, the president and his family can warm up near one of the White House's 28 fireplaces. And when it is hot outside, they can swim in the outdoor pool. It's best to email your teachers if you have questions about class. Plan your study time well to make sure you review everything. True or false tests seem harder to students than essay questions.